Welcome to the Living Centred podcast, a podcast all about learning together how to live lives which are centred on Jesus. Everyone lives centred on something. Our goal is to learn together how every area of our lives, everything about who we are and how we live, can be increasingly oriented around Jesus and transformed by Jesus. He invites us to a rich and satisfying life, where the good news that he truly is enough changes everything about how we relate to God, ourselves, and the world. In each episode, a different person shares about what it's looking like for them to seek to centre their life on Jesus right now. As we hear their stories, we get to learn together and to encourage one another in what it means for Jesus to be at the centre of our lives. This is a journey we are all invited to, and a conversation we all get to be a part of. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, my name's Adrian, and it is so good to welcome you to this week's episode of the Living Centred podcast. And it is my privilege to introduce today Rachel, who will be sharing this week. Rachel, it is very good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
It's going to be great. To ease you in, as I would do each time, I wondered if you could just start by telling us a bit about yourself, who you are, and what your life looks like at this point in time.
Yeah, so my name's Rachel. I'm married to Andrew. We've been married nearly 14 years. We have 3 primary school age children with various additional needs. And most of my life in this season is caring for them and discipling them.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And as always, I will be disciplined and not ask more questions about that, but rather jump in with the big question that within all of that, what does living centered on Jesus look like for you right now?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's about 3 things. It's a desire to be with Jesus, to become like Jesus, and then to do what Jesus would do. And I do that through the practices of Jesus, like prayer and fasting, observing the Sabbath, living in community, silence and solitude, and reading the Bible.
Yeah.
Those are really my starting point for building my rule of life. And a rule of life is just a set of practices and relational rhythms that help create space in our busy world for me to be with Jesus, to become like Jesus and do what he would do, to live life to the full in his kingdom.
That sounds brilliant. It sounds really helpful and just a great framework of just that being with, becoming like, and then doing what Jesus did. I just love that. I feel like, that's great. And in it, you've already started to hint at some of the things that are helping you in there, where you talked about that rule of life. But I wonder if you could just talk maybe a little bit more around that, or other things that are helping you there as you seek to live around those 3 aspects of life.
Yeah, so a rule of life is always evolving, sort of as your seasons evolve. So for me, as an extreme introvert, silence and solitude is like top priority.
Yeah.
And so I structure my day to go to bed early so that I can wake up early before my children get up, so that I can be with Jesus in the quiet before anything else, because I'm just a better person when I start the day that way. And so
Me too.
in that time, I like to start just by sitting in silence before Jesus. I'm not really expecting a word or a revelation. I'm just surrendering myself to him and his will for me today. And then I think it's really helpful for me to remember that it's practicing the way of Jesus. That it's practicing.
Yeah.
And so I found that language really helpful, because the more we practice something, the better we get at it. And this is something I'm constantly trying to teach my children, that, you're not as good as this person yet because you haven't done as much practice. And so, for example, in the last few years, I've been more intentional about practicing fasting. Yeah. And to start with, that meant I missed morning snack. I eat a lot through the day. And so I'd have breakfast and I'd miss my morning snack, and then I'd eat lunch. And that was a really big deal for me.
No, sure.
But now I've had a bit more practice, I can go for longer.
It's really helpful.
And sort of fast from the night before until more like 2:00. But I'm always practicing, and I'm still growing, and I'm trusting in Jesus when I'm hungry. So yeah.
Sounds great. I guess there's 2 things that strike me in what you say. Is one is just the way in which it just takes planning and being intentional And so that reality of just, I just need to go to bed a bit earlier.
Yeah.
Which can be easy to say, hard to do. I love that. Just, I've just got to be intentional here. And then I really like the invitation in the practice is that it's then not something you're beating yourself up about, but rather, oh no, this is like an invitation to just get to enjoy more.
Yeah.
Which is just, really, really exciting. I guess within it then, what is it that you're discovering through all of this about who God is as Father, Son, and Spirit?
Yeah, I think I'm just discovering just how gracious God is. And I think that links in with the practicing, doesn't it? That he is so gracious. And I feel a bit like the little boy in the Gospels who turned up with his packed lunch and he offered it to Jesus and Jesus multiplied it to feed thousands of people. And I turn up each morning with the little bit I have and I surrender it to Jesus. And he's so good and kind and gracious and he multiplies it. And often I have a much better day than I was anticipating. And also just through being a parent, I feel like I've really grown in my understanding of God's love for me. I love my children so much, and yet that's just a tiny, imperfect picture of how much Yahweh loves me and how he feels about me. And it's kind of beautiful and overwhelming to know that I'm loved unconditionally just as I am, and that Yahweh's just really delighted in me, just as I'm delighted in my children, even when they're messy and imperfect.
I love that. I love the beauty of it, of both that learning more of how God loves us through just parenting children. I think, oh, wow, this is a different perspective. I also love just the reality of you saying, what I'm realizing as I'm practicing, as I'm using this rule of life is just more of God's grace. Because you'd expect it to be the opposite. You'd expect it to be, I'm learning that, it's rules and regulations and it's going to be harsh and hard. Whereas I think it's just beautiful to hear you talk about it. No, what I'm discovering is more of God's unconditional love and kindness.
Yeah.
This is really good. Yeah, really good. So I guess then the last question is how are you changing then? If we were to have met you 3, 6, 12 months ago, how would Rachel now look different to then?
Well, I'm kind of reminded of 2 Bible verses. The first is from Matthew 6:33 that says, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." And then the second is Galatians 5:22 and 23 that says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." And I just think that, I know I'm growing in the fruit of the Spirit the more that I seek to be with Jesus.
Yeah.
The more that I'm becoming like him and the more that I'm able to do what he would do through his Spirit living in me as I seek his kingdom first.
That's amazing. I'm loving that. And can I push you one little instant? And you can maybe say, Adrian, you didn't ask this one. And that's okay. But it's just what does that then look like through your day?
So I think the one I notice most is patience. I didn't used to be a patient person at all. And I remember 10 years ago, I would often say to God, "Oh, please grow patience in me." And, God's really funny because he says, "I'm not just going to give you patience. I'm going to help you grow in that and help you practice." And he gives us loads of opportunities where we can practice being patient. And so now, people often say to me, with the children or on the school gate, "Oh, Rachel, you're so patient." And I'm like, yeah, Jesus, that's Jesus in me. Yeah. That's been hard won through a lot of practice. But it's really encouraging to see that, I wasn't patient and now I think I am quite patient.
That's amazing.
But that's the work of God in me.
Yeah. It's just I think it's so liberating. Because sometimes we can think, it's if I do X, Y, and Z. We're actually, the way of revealing who Jesus is, of doing what he did, it's being patient. And then what happens then when Jesus says, be salt and light, we think, what's that going to like? Oh, yeah, it looks like that. It looks like being patient. Yeah. And people notice and see it and taste it and think, this seems good. Yeah. And you say, that's just God working through. It's beautiful. Yeah. Really, really good. Rachel, thank you so much for sharing. You're As welcome. Always, my heart is full. It does me good just hearing different people's stories, and just hearing yours today just does me good. I think from just the beauty and wonder of all that you've shared, what I'm going to be considering over this coming week a little bit more is one, just being intentional, as I felt a bit challenged of being intentional of going to bed a bit earlier.
Yeah, it's really simple.
Oh, it really is. And I just think I often have meetings that are in the evening and it's staying late. And I think, no, what I need to do is there's an intentionality of if I get to bed earlier, actually my day's going to start a bit better the next day. And so I think a very practical thing, but I feel like, yep, I think that's something I need to do there. I think the other side is just that beauty and wonder that as we go about the practices that we see in how Jesus lived, that there's just more of God's grace to discover. And I think I just want to, this coming week, in some of the different practices I do, is just say, yep, I just want to enjoy your grace in this. I think that's going to be good. So yeah, that's me. How about you, my listening friends? Yes, you. I'm talking to you. What are you going to be doing this coming week as you consider all of the wonder and beauty of what Rachel has shared? Finally, I just want to say a prayer for each and every one of us. I pray we would know more of the wonder of living centered on Jesus this coming week. Amen.
Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of the Living Centred podcast. New episodes are released every Monday, and if you enjoyed this episode, please do like and subscribe on your chosen podcast provider to receive them direct each week. Living Centred is produced by the team at Oasis Church in Birmingham, UK, and you can find out more and get in touch with the team via theoasischurch.com.